My dad traded my mom for a female mule. Mules can't reproduce, but they have a uterus and can get pregnant. So, every night, my dad would bring the female mule into the house to mate. He said that as long as the mule got pregnant, we'd strike it rich. My dad cut open the pregnant mule's uterus, and a pound of gold dropped out. But he didn't know that this gold could move. My dad took my mom down the mountain. Before leaving, he told me that my mom was a useless woman. Having her around just meant one more mouth to feed, so it was better to trade her for livestock. When my dad returned, my mom was gone, and there was a female mule in the house. The mule wasn't very tall but looked old and clumsy. "Dad, why didn't you trade for a smarter mule? This one looks like it's past its prime." My dad tied the female mule in the shed he had built. "Your mom's getting on in years, she's only worth this much. They only gave me this old mule." I asked my dad why he didn't trade for a cow or some other livestock. "Mules can't reproduce, so they can't have baby mules to sell. Isn't that a losing deal? It'd be better if mom was still here to take care of you." My dad gave me a sideways glance while soothing the agitated mule. "Your mom's old. What else can she do besides eat? This mule can make us rich. All it has to do is get pregnant." That night, my dad brought the mule into the house. He said he would personally mate with the mule. I had no idea how my dad planned to mate with the mule. Late at night, I heard the mule groaning continuously, and my dad was swearing. "You stupid animal, why are you moving? You almost made me sterile. If you get pregnant, you'll get the best care, so don't be ungrateful." The next day, I asked my dad if the mule was pregnant, and he gave me a smack on the head. "Don't ask things you shouldn't. Now, take the mule back to the shed." When I entered the room, I smelled a foul stench. The mule was lying on the floor, sleeping. I didn't feel any goodwill toward it. If it weren't for this mule, my mom wouldn't have been sold. I kicked its belly, and the mule jumped up, startled. I cursed at it, mimicking what my dad said last night. "Stupid animal, all you do is sleep. You stink to high heaven, now get back to the shed." The mule stomped the ground with its front hooves, as if trying to scare me. If it kicked me, I'd be bedridden for half a month. Not daring to say anything more, I tied it in the shed. Looking at it, I started thinking about my mom. I wondered how she was doing. Had she been sold somewhere else? As I was about to turn away, I noticed the mule staring at me. I actually saw kindness in its eyes. How strange. My dad mated with the mule every day, and after a month, he had lost a lot of weight. "Dad, is it that hard to mate with a mule?" "Humph, what do you know? You're just a kid." I really didn't understand, but I started feeling like the mule was spying on me. When I fed it hay, it would come up to me and make noises. "Get away from me. Just get pregnant and make us rich. Then I can go find my mom." The mule chewed the hay, staring at me with its big eyes. It chewed the hay the same way my mom used to, 30 times for each mouthful. I patted its head and said, "My dad has little patience. If you don't get pregnant, he'll kill you." The mule seemed to understand, snorting twice in response. That night, my dad finally lost his patience and drove the mule out of the house. He whipped it and kicked its belly. "All you do is eat and get fat, and you still haven't gotten pregnant. The ancient texts say it should only take a month." As the noise subsided, I was about to close my eyes and sleep, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw a huge shadow on the window. Something was standing outside my window. I sat up suddenly, looking carefully. The shadow was large and long, and as it moved, I saw two pointed things. Those were the mule's ears. The female mule was silently standing upright outside the window. In a flash, the shadow was gone. I heard the sound of hooves hitting the ground, but if you listened closely, it didn't sound like 4 hooves. I didn't dare go out to check. I pulled the blanket over my head and forced myself to sleep. The next morning, I went to the shed to check on the mule. It was lying on the hay, sleeping, with nothing unusual about it. I thought I had imagined everything last night and put some hay in the feeding trough. "Mule, get up and eat." The mule chewed the hay even slower than before, not looking very interested. I teased, "What, did you go out for a midnight snack?" The mule suddenly raised its head, its mouth still mechanically chewing. "What's wrong?" "Not happy." Mid-sentence, I froze. If I wasn't mistaken, there was a piece of meat stuck in the mule's teeth. But aren't mules herbivores? "Dad, Dad. What are you yelling for? Trying to bring the dead back to life?" My dad opened the door, yawning, and came over to me. I stammered, the mule ate meat." "Meat? What nonsense are you talking about?" My dad glanced at me dismissively and then pried open the mule's thick lips. There was nothing between its teeth, just the smell of grass. My dad scolded me again and then left to do farm work. As I watched him leave, the mule turned its head and stuck out its massive tongue at me. On its tongue was the piece of meat I had seen earlier. Then, the mule rolled its tongue back. It chewed noisily, but its eyes were locked on me. It was watching my reaction. I was so scared I fell to the ground and stammered, I haven't done anything to harm you, so don't hurt me. Hiss. The mule snorted as if mocking me. The mule my dad brought home had become a spirit. Last night definitely wasn't my imagination. The mule had sneaked out to hunt. And it could walk upright. I didn't dare complain to my dad about the mule anymore, even when we were alone. He wouldn't believe me anyway. All I could do was keep a close eye on it. During this time, the mule's appetite grew larger. When I told my dad about the change, he immediately called Uncle Hong from the village to check on it. Uncle Hong felt the mule's belly, his brow furrowed in uncertainty. Eric, this mule is pregnant. Pregnant? Are you sure? My dad was ecstatic. Uncle Hong nodded. I've never seen a mule get pregnant before, but from what I can tell, that's what's happening. Good, good, Xiao Xiao, go get that basket of eggs for Uncle Hong. My dad treasured those eggs, only bringing them out on special occasions. It showed how happy he really was. After Uncle Hong left, I saw my dad grab the mule and kiss it hard. Good job. Now that you're pregnant, I'll give you anything you want. The mule nuzzled its head against my dad's chest like a woman, but I noticed a slight smirk at the corner of its mouth. It was a sinister smile. Ever since the mule got pregnant, my dad brought it back into the house to care for it. At night, I no longer heard it going out to hunt. At first, everything was fine, but as time went on, the mule started refusing to eat. My dad was worried sick. He stroked the mule's belly, speaking gently, "My dear, what are you trying to do? You can't starve the baby inside you." The mule grunted twice but refused to eat any hay. My dad was desperate. "Tell me, what do you want to eat? I'll get it for you." I remembered the piece of meat I saw that day and said, "Dad, it probably wants to eat meat." My dad frowned at my words, but he didn't argue. "Go to the kitchen and get a piece of pork." When I brought the meat close to the mule's mouth, it opened its mouth and ate it with great relish. This time, my dad believed it. I heard him mumbling to himself. This wasn't mentioned in the ancient book. Dad, what ancient book? What does it say? This time, instead of scolding me, my dad explained, "Before your grandfather died, he gave me an ancient book. It contains records about raising mules." He gestured towards the mule that was eating meat. "This isn't an ordinary female mule. It took a lot of effort for your dad to get this golden mule." Golden mule? It said that a golden mule, when impregnated with human essence for 30 days, will produce gold after 90 days. If we just wait a little longer, this mule will have gold inside. There was no sign of anything in the mule's belly. When I placed my hand on its belly, I suddenly felt something move inside, but when my dad touched it again, there was no movement. Stop being so paranoid. This mule is our family's fortune, so be careful not to offend it. I saw the mocking look in the mule's eyes but didn't dare to respond. 90 days passed quickly. While I was preparing meat for the mule during the day, I heard a commotion from the stable. I hurried to the stable and saw the mule violently banging against the walls. "Dad, the mule has gone crazy." My dad came running at the noise. He looked at the situation and slapped his thigh. "The gold has fully formed. Xiao Xiao, quick, bring the scissors and hot water." I rushed to the kitchen and handed the scissors to my dad. After disinfecting the scissors with alcohol, he directly cut open the mule's belly. He reached into the womb and continued cutting. To our amazement, a large chunk of gleaming gold fell out. "Gold! Gold!" My dad picked up the gold and shouted with joy. Then, he hastily stitched up the mule's wound. The mule lay weakly on the ground. I asked, "Dad, will it be okay like this? It won't die, right?" "Don't worry, the golden mule has a strong recovery ability. In 3 days, its womb will be as good as new." After saying that, my dad didn't bother with the mule anymore and ran into the house with the gold. I squatted in front of the mule and sighed. "Is this fortunate or unfortunate for you? You can carry gold, so my dad will definitely cherish you. But after this, you'll suffer, always having to carry gold and always getting your belly cut open." After I finished speaking, I turned to leave. As I was closing the gate, I heard a voice, faint and fragmented. "Meat, give me meat." I was shocked and turned around to see the mule speaking human words. It opened its mouth wide, its thick tongue stretched out long, and saliva kept dripping down. The mule's eyes had somehow turned into vertical pupils. It slowly stood upright and staggered toward me. Meat, my heart nearly stopped in fear. I had no doubt that if I didn't give the mule meat, it would eat me. I quickly sprinted to the kitchen. You, wait here, I'll get you some meat. Since my dad got the gold, he held onto it like a treasure. You stay home and watch the mule, don't let anyone take it. I'm going to find a buyer. He wrapped the golden cloth and hurried out. Suddenly, with a thud, he bumped into the village head who had come looking for him. Genwa, what are you doing? You nearly knocked these old bones of mine apart, making such a fuss. My dad stammered, and nothing, I just have something to do. The gold in his hand fell to the ground. He scrambled to pick it up, but the village head caught sight of it. The village head thought he was seeing things and quickly picked up the object. Gold? The village head bit into the gold to check, confirming, it really is gold. Genwa, where did you get this gold? You didn't steal it, did you? Sneaking around like that. When my dad heard this, he got defensive immediately. Uncle, you can't just say anything that comes to mind. This is gold our family's mule produced. A mule? Your mule can produce gold? Realizing he had misspoken, my dad clammed up, not wanting to say more. The village head, intrigued, kept the gold and walked into our yard. I've never heard of a mule producing gold. I'll have to see it for myself. When he saw the mule, he was astonished. This mule really is different. Look at those eyes, almost like a human's. Genwa, if your mule can produce gold, you can't keep this to yourself. You have to teach the rest of the village how to get rich too. My dad stubbornly retorted, why should I? When someone in the village got rich, did they ever share it with me? Why should I share my secret with them? Seeing my dad's greedy attitude, the village head struck him with a stick. You ungrateful brat. You grew up eating from the village's rice pot, who here hasn't helped feed you? Even when you got married, it was the village that chipped in to help, or how else would you have had Zaire, a son to carry on your name? Our village has thrived because we stick together. If we weren't united, those women's families would have come to take them back long ago. How could the women still be so obedient? You ungrateful wretch, hiding away to get rich from the people who raised you. I ought to beat you to death. My dad was at a loss for words, unwillingly muttering the truth. It's not that I don't want to share, it's just that this mule is one of a kind. You can't just find one anywhere. I found out about it from an ancient book. My dad pulled out a tattered piece of paper from his pocket. This is the ancient book you were talking about? The village head was unimpressed but took it to read carefully. The golden mule must be prepared with a barren woman, born in the year, month, and hour of Een. She should be mild-tempered, hard-working, and obedient. We don't have such a woman in the village. I suddenly thought of my mom, who had a good temperament and whose birthday seemed to match. But my mom could bear children, she had given birth to me. So, with mixed feelings of curiosity and relief, I continued listening. Where did you find your mule? And where's your wife? My dad glanced at me and whispered, I traded for it with Tsuehua. A ready-made mule? A Een woman. The village head, understanding the rarity and value of the golden mule, simply acknowledged that the villagers lacked the luck to obtain one. After handing the gold back to my dad, he turned to leave. But just as my dad was about to celebrate, the village head suddenly turned around, his face lit up with excitement. I almost missed it. If we can't get a new mule, isn't there already one here? Genwa, the book says the golden mule needs to be impregnated with human essence for 30 days to produce gold. You could rent out the mule, charge rent, and then take a share of the gold they get. That way, everyone wins, and our village could become wealthy. Rent it out? My dad rubbed his chin, looking at the mule chewing on meat. It's not a bad idea, but I'll set a high price. Uncle, you need to make it clear to the villagers. I'm already losing out here, so I can't afford to take a loss. Don't worry. You bring the mule to the ancestral hall, and I'll gather the villagers. The village head hurried out, his stooped back suddenly straightening. Worried about the mule's uniqueness, I nervously asked my dad. Dad, are you really going to rent it out? Do you think our mule will agree? My dad, who was feeling a bit reluctant at first, got angry when I said that and snapped, it's just a beast, what does it have to agree to? It'll do whatever I tell it to. Hurry up and bring the mule to the ancestral hall with me. Don't dawdle. I didn't dare to argue, so I went to the stable to get the mule. This is the village head's and my dad's idea, don't blame me. If you're angry, take it out on them. As I walked, I whispered softly into the ear of the female mule, observing its reactions. The mule showed no resistance, it obediently followed us. In fact, it walked faster and faster, eventually overtaking me. It seemed particularly familiar with the village. When we arrived, the village men had already gathered. They focused their attention on us, or rather, on the female mule. "Eric, is this the golden mule the village chief mentioned? Can it really bear gold?" My father ignored him and walked past me, leading the mule onto the platform of the ancestral hall. He then loudly announced, "You all must have heard from the village chief." I was initially unwilling to share this secret, but for the prosperity of our village, I'll make some sacrifices. "You can rent this female mule until it conceives gold, but half of the gold belongs to me." No one objected, but they remained skeptical about the golden mule's ability to bear gold. "Can this mule really bear gold? It doesn't look any different from other mules." "Yeah, Eric, you need to prove what you're saying is true. What if we spend money and it can't conceive gold?" My father snorted, raising the piece of gold he had high in the air. "Anyone who doesn't believe, take a look for yourself." The gold was passed to the first person, and everyone took a bite. It was real. "Eric isn't lying, it's real gold." I want to be the first to rent it." "I'll rent it." Everyone scrambled to be the first to rent the golden mule. The village chief raised his hand to quiet them down, then said softly, "Everyone will get their turn, no need to rush. But since I discovered this first, let me go first." Upon hearing this, the villagers exchanged strange glances and looked at the lower half of the village chief's body. They had heard rumors about how the female mule was made to bear gold. The chief was of an age, and they wondered if he could handle it. Even my father hesitated. "Uncle, it's not that I don't want to rent it to you, but at your age, can you manage? I'm worried that if the gold doesn't take, you might not be able to handle it." The village chief struck him on the buttocks with a stick, cursing, "Don't talk nonsense. I'm still strong, don't worry about your money, it'll be fine." Since the chief insisted, no one said anything more. They just prayed that he wasn't overestimating his abilities. In the end, the chief proudly led the mule home. My father lay on the bed, counting money, with the gold safely tucked into a chest. He said that when everyone in the village had gold, they could sell it together or find a buyer. Anyway, he wasn't short on rent money now. I asked him, "Dad, can the chief really do it?" "Who cares if he can or can't? As long as I make money, that's all that matters. If the mule doesn't conceive in a month, I'll rent it to the next man." A month passed, and before my father could visit the chief's house, someone came from there. Bella stood at our door, cursing loudly, "Eric, you ungrateful wretch. When you were running around naked as a kid, I fed you, and now look at you. I don't know where you found this mule, but when my husband brought it home and said he was going to mate it, I thought it was nonsense. But it turns out he meant it literally. How heartless can you be, not worrying that your uncle might break his back and die on that mule?" My father walked out of the yard, laughing and trying to calm her down. "Auntie, don't talk like that. You don't know how good this golden mule is. I'm helping your family get rich. If the mule conceives gold, you'll have big gold bars soon enough." Bella frowned, "Is that true? I've been wondering how my old man has had so much energy lately, sneaking into the mule's pen every night. Let me go check." "Don't rush, Auntie. I'll go with you. It's about time anyway. If the mule hasn't conceived, I'll need to rent it to the next family." Seeing them head out, I quickly followed. When we arrived at the chief's house, we found Uncle hung there too. To our surprise, the mule was pregnant again. My father's eyes widened in disbelief as he looked at the now much thinner village chief. "Uncle, you're really something. You actually succeeded in mating it." The chief, full of pride, stroked his beard. Bella patted the mule's belly and asked, "Is there gold inside?" The chief nodded. "I've told you many times, wife, if it weren't for earning our son's dowry, I wouldn't be doing such things. You know I'm a decent man." Bella spat at him but said nothing. My father continued collecting rent for 3 more months and then took me home. Before leaving, I glanced at the mule. It was staring intently at the back of the village chief's head, suddenly opening its mouth wide. When it noticed me watching, it tilted its head and aimed its mouth at the chief's entire head. Its saliva dripped onto his hair. I immediately understood its intention. It was measuring the size of the chief's head. Nearly a month later, word spread through the village that a weasel had been spotted recently eating the chickens and ducks at the chief's house. My heart grew uneasy, and I ran to the chief's house. I peeked into the mule's pen. It was breathing heavily, kicking its hooves, and the untouched grass in its feed trough told me everything I needed to know. Those missing chickens and ducks were likely related to it. Bella, what are you doing sneaking around? Come in and play, Bella called to me after spotting me, handing me some candy. She was chewing sunflower seeds, her face full of hope as she looked at the mule. Because it's possibly pregnant with gold, this mule has been getting more and more irritable. I even cut fresh grass for it, but it barely touched it. Clenching the candy in my hand, I whispered to Bella, Granny, you should feed it meat. It likes meat. Meat? Mules are supposed to eat grass, aren't they? Bella's voice rose as she shouted. I immediately felt the prickly gaze behind me. The mule was watching me. I felt like my back was on fire, and I jumped up and ran out. Granny, it's getting late. I should go home now. But remember what I said. Aren't you staying for dinner? Be careful running so fast, you might fall, you silly boy. That night, just as I was about to fall asleep, there was a sudden knock on my window. I looked up and saw a large shadow cast on the window. Two sharp, spear-like things swayed back and forth. Creak, creak. The sound of bones being crunched made my heart jump into my throat. Then there was another knock on the window. It was the mule. It had come to find me in the middle of the night. I didn't know if it wanted to eat me or if it was grateful that I had reminded Bella to feed it meat. I clung to my blanket, not daring to make a sound. Hee hee. A creepy, mocking sound echoed in the darkness. The shadow swayed a few more times and then disappeared. I didn't dare sleep for the rest of the night. At dawn, Bella's loud cry pierced the stillness of the village. The old man is missing. People rushed over and found Bella collapsed on the village path. Auntie, what happened? Someone asked. Tears streamed down Bella's face. The old man drank too much last night and insisted on going out. He didn't come back all night. Auntie, don't worry. We'll all help you look for him. Everyone spread out to search for the village chief, but I slipped into his house. The mule was lying quietly on the ground, no longer as agitated as before. Its belly was noticeably rounder. We found him. We found him. A man ran over to report, followed by a few others carrying something on a stretcher. As they approached, I realized it was a mutilated corpse. Most of the head and body were missing, and the internal organs had been hollowed out. The chief must have been drunk, wandered up the mountain, and encountered a bear or a tiger, someone guessed. The sight of the gruesome remains left everyone trembling with fear. Bella's wails filled the air as she mourned. Old man, what am I going to do without you? You died so horribly. Bella cried during the funeral, but she was sharp and efficient in handling the village chief's affairs. During this time, Bella made a trip to the shed. I was just bringing some meat to feed the mule. I thought maybe if it was full, it wouldn't eat people. As I approached, I saw Bella gently stroking the mule's belly. From now on, I'll be relying on the gold inside your belly, so make sure it's a big piece. Then I'll sell it, leave the village, and go find my son in the city. That old man should have died long ago. I've suffered too much. Back in the day, I was a college student, you know. Bella handled the funeral well, and the villagers praised her. Aunt Bella is really capable. The village chief didn't marry her for nothing. Exactly. Back then, she was a college student from the city. If the chief hadn't pulled some strings and spent a lot of money, he might not have been able to marry her. And she was treated terribly back then. I had a suspicion, maybe Bella planned all this. Time flew by, and it was time to harvest the gold from the mule. My dad took me to Bella's house, and the whole village came to watch. They wanted to witness if the legendary mule could really produce gold. When my dad used scissors to cut open the mule's uterus, revealing the shiny gold inside, the villagers were ecstatic. Gold? I see gold. Eric is a genius. He actually figured out something so profitable. The quick ones immediately crowded around my dad, stuffing rental fees into his pocket. Eric, I'm next. Here's the rent in advance. My dad handed the gold to Bella, stitching up the mule's belly as he said, all right, come in 3 days to take it away. That person ran home happily, saying he was going to prepare a place for the mule to stay. Bella carefully accepted the gold, her hands trembling slightly. How much is this big piece worth? My dad stood up, washing his hands, and reminded her, Aunt Bella, this gold is half mine. When we sell it, don't forget to give me my share. Bella nodded, not committing to anything. My dad left, satisfied, taking the mule with him. You're our village's hero now. Rest up and start making more gold. I dawdled behind, then ran back to Bella's house. Grandma, where did you put the gold? This gold is mine. Your grandma is counting on it for her old age. Why do you ask? I insisted Bella take out the gold. The stone-sized piece of gold reminded me of the strange movement I felt before. Grandma, do you really believe the mule can produce gold? I heard you were a college student when you were young. The smile on Bella's face suddenly froze. She said, do you really want to know if this gold is real? I nodded and shared my thoughts with her. Grandma, I think this isn't a good thing. I'm afraid something bad will happen to you. Bella looked at me with an ambiguous expression. She said, then let's find out what this thing really is. Bella started a fire, and when it grew large, she threw the gold in. The intense heat cooked the gold, and slowly, I saw it turn red. Thump thump thump. I heard a strong heartbeat. The gold actually had a heartbeat. Huff huff huff. A low growl, just like the mule's, came from inside. As she watched the gold come to life, Bella told me under the flickering firelight, actually, your grandma's son died out there long ago. I never liked him. He was just like his father, a failure. If I hadn't been sold to this place back then, I would have graduated, had a job I liked, and married someone I loved. I was the first to find that ancient book. I deliberately dropped it where everyone passed by, and your dad picked it up. Bella told me that the book only contained half the information. People had tried to create these strange mules, thinking they could produce gold. Later, they realized this was called living gold. It had the appearance of gold, but when exposed to high heat, it came to life, with monsters inside that could eat people. They would seek out the man whose blood had given them life, then devour him to evolve into a true, golden mule. Bella left the village. She told everyone she was going to live with her son in the city. When she left, Bella didn't take the gold. She asked me to give it to my dad instead. She said that if it didn't find the man it was connected to by blood, it would merge with the other gold. I watched as my dad happily placed the 2 pieces of gold at the bottom of the box. Bella's really foolish. Even if she went to the city, she should have taken the gold, sold it, and given me my share when she came back. Poor uncle worked for nothing. But why should I care about her? What use does a woman have with so much money anyway? At least she's sensible. I didn't argue with him and smiled. Dad, did you send the mule to Uncle Jiang's house? Yes, Uncle Jiang was so eager, he couldn't even wait to close the door before taking off his pants. Watching my dad's satisfied expression, I quietly left the room. My dad is selfish and quick-tempered. When my mom was alive, she often got beaten. He treats me fairly well, but sometimes he shows a look that I can't stand. I don't understand why. Wasn't I the son he always wanted? Why does he treat me like a servant? The mule got pregnant again. It kept working non-stop, being taken to different villagers' homes. But then, strange things started happening more frequently. Chickens and ducks went missing, and a villager was found dead on the mountain, killed in the same way as the village chief. Everyone thought there was a fierce beast in the mountains, and they became fearful, building high walls around their yards. The remaining villagers also didn't dare to go out at night. 2 strange things happened in our house, too. The mule disappeared. And my dad's 2 pieces of gold became 1, but it was much bigger. My dad cursed the mule for being disobedient and running away, not giving him more gold. But he also knew that even though the mule could recover quickly, it took longer each time. From 3 days to 5, 10, 15 days. Even if the mule was still around, it wouldn't be of much use anymore. He originally planned to have the villagers eat it when it couldn't produce gold anymore. That animal was smart, it ran away early. Over time, my dad didn't care much anymore. One night, my dad gathered everyone. Now that every family has gold, tomorrow, let's all go out and exchange it for money. Don't forget to give me my share. The villagers agreed, don't worry, you won't miss a penny. Early the next morning, just as everyone was about to leave, an old acquaintance arrived in the village. Aunt Bella, what are you doing back? Bella had transformed. She was dressed stylishly and even had her hair done. Someone joked, did you strike it rich out there, Aunt Bella? You look 10 years younger. She laughed, my son is doing well, he's a big boss now. I came back today because I told him our village has gold, and he's willing to buy it from you. The villagers were thrilled, but no one had ever seen Bella's son. It was rumored that the village chief sent him away to study when he was young. Our village was known for rejecting outsiders. Bella noticed everyone's hesitation and said, don't worry, I came alone and brought money. She opened her bag, revealing a stack of red cash. The villagers eagerly took out their gold. Exchange it, Aunt Bella, let me go first. Don't rush. Throw your gold on the ground. I need to light a fire to test it. They say gold fears no flame. The villagers tossed their gold onto the ground. Bella lit a fire and threw the gold pieces in one by one. As the temperature rose, everyone eagerly watched the gold in the flames. Thump thump thump, the gold's heart began to beat. Then, crack. Sharp claws tore through the golden shells. The mule-headed, human-bodied creatures stared at the stunned villagers. Dad, that was my dad. They spoke in human tongues, charging straight toward their targets. Screams filled the air as the monsters opened their mouths, biting down on their blood-related fathers to complete the final purification. As their forehooves touched the ground, they transformed into golden mules. The surroundings were littered with severed limbs and debris, and Bella and I set the entire village ablaze. I asked, what should we do with these golden mules? Bella, observing their obedient and docile demeanor, pointed toward the forest. The mother mule will come to collect them. A low, rumbling breath echoed from afar, gradually approaching. The mother mule had indeed returned. The small golden mules instinctively followed in its wake. Bella led the way, intending to guide them, but the mother mule silently raised its neck and opened its massive mouth. Crunch, it bit Bella to death. Then, it led the golden mule herd into the woods. I took a few cautious steps forward and asked, "Are you my mother?" The mother mule turned its gaze toward me, its vertical pupils sending a chill down my spine. I turned and ran as fast as I could, but deep down, I already knew the answer. My name is Zuri, a girl who loves to smile. I'm an only child, and I was considered outstanding in university. But during a trip, I was taken into the mountains, where a man named Eric bought me. I begged him to let me go, but Eric slapped me hard. He treated me like an animal, chaining me up in the house so I couldn't leave. It wasn't until I became pregnant that he finally unchained me. But he didn't know, I wasn't carrying his child. It was the village chief's. The village chief was a beast in human form. He took advantage of Eric's absence to assault me and threatened to kill me if I told anyone. I felt guilty for Bella, who had been the kindest to me in the village. She always sneaked eggs to me to ensure I got some nutrition. It turned out she was also a kidnapped woman. I thought I had found a kindred spirit and sought her help to escape. I told her my plan to run away. But halfway through the escape, Eric and the villagers surrounded me. After being dragged back, I was beaten within an inch of my life. Only later did I realize that Bella had betrayed me. Though she was also abducted, she seemed to relish watching me suffer. The eggs she gave me were just an excuse to see the wounds on my body. After that, I gave up on escaping and eventually gave birth to Zaire. Perhaps Eric realized that Zaire wasn't his son, and he didn't treat him well. I lost my looks, and I was nothing more than a haggard woman. Eric found me repulsive, which I was quite happy about. But I never imagined how depraved he could be. One day, he seemed to have found a treasure, smiling foolishly at me while clutching something close to his chest. One day, he suddenly told me I could leave. I was so excited that I thanked him for the first time. Eric offered to accompany me, and I didn't refuse. As I reached the forest, I felt a sharp pain at the back of my head. When I regained consciousness, I found myself back at home. I tried to speak, but only animalistic sounds came out. Eric had turned me into the mother mule. I also discovered something miraculous: I could conceive monsters. These monsters could kill every man in the village, so I cooperated fully with Eric's plans. But I occasionally got peckish and would sneak out for a snack, though my son caught me doing it. I didn't particularly like him since he wasn't supposed to exist in the first place. But I didn't harm him. After all the villagers were dead, Bella thought she had avenged herself, and I appeared grateful to her. But, unfortunately for her, her head looked just the right size to fit in my mouth. The boy asked me if I was his mother in the end. Heh. His mother had long been dead. I'm just a mother mule. My father had a circus, and the monkeys he trained were as clever as demons. But every night, the monkeys would cry out loudly. My father didn't think much of it, but he warned me not to touch the monkeys' toes. At night, I heard a monkey whispering in my ear, "Scratch that itch for me, my toes are about to be cursed."